Once upon a time, in a quiet little town, there lived a woman named Émilie. Married for 10 years to Thomas, a man who was once charming but now unrecognizable, Émilie lived a life of silent suffering. Their relationship, once filled with love and promise, had become a nightmare she couldn't escape. Thomas, who had once promised to love and cherish her, changed after their marriage. The pressures of daily life, responsibilities, and his own insecurities had transformed the gentleman she married into an angry, abusive person. Émilie became the target of his frustration, living in constant fear of triggering his rage. Every day, Émilie wore a mask, hiding her bruises behind a forced smile. Her friends, her family, no one knew what she endured behind the closed doors of her home. She convinced herself that things would get better, that Thomas would return to the man she loved. But with each passing day, her hopes crumbled a little more. That night, the night that would change her life forever, began like any other. Thomas came home late, the smell of alcohol heavy in the air. Émilie knew what was coming. Her hands trembled as she prepared dinner, trying not to provoke his anger. But that night, no matter what she did, Thomas was determined to find a reason to lash out. The first blow came without warning. The dish she was holding crashed to the floor, porcelain shards scattering around her. She stumbled back, her eyes filled with tears, but he didn't stop. Blows rained down, accompanied by his furious shouts. Émilie tried to protect herself, but she was powerless against Thomas's rage. In that instant, something inside her shifted. A flame, a small glimmer of hope she thought had long been extinguished, ignited in her heart. She couldn't continue like this. She had to fight for herself, for her life. In a desperate move, she pushed Thomas with all the strength she could muster. Surprised, he stumbled backward, giving her a window of opportunity to flee. Émilie ran towards the door, her heart pounding. She took nothing with her, only her newfound courage. She rushed outside into the cold, dark night, her bare feet hitting the hard ground. She ran without stopping, leaving behind Thomas's shouts and the memories of her years of suffering. That night, Émilie found refuge with a childhood friend, someone she could finally trust. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry, releasing all the pain she had suppressed. She knew her life would never be the same, but she also knew she had just taken the first step towards freedom. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and difficult decisions. Émilie filed a complaint against Thomas, determined never to return to that hell. She found the support she had never dared to ask for from her family, friends, and local associations. Little by little, she rebuilt herself, becoming a stronger, more resilient woman than she ever thought possible. That night, the one where she chose to break free, would be etched in her memory forever, a night of horror, but also a night of rebirth. The following days were a test of mental strength for Émilie. Each morning, she woke up to a reality she wasn't yet accustomed to. She was free, but that freedom came at a price. There were the legal procedures, the interrogations, and the constant fear that Thomas might find her. She still remembered his rage-filled gaze when, for the first time, she dared to stand up to him. It was a face she couldn't forget. Émilie had found refuge at her friend Clara's house, who welcomed her arrival with surprise but no questions. She had seen her come in, face bruised, eyes red from tears, and without hesitation, had pulled her into a hug. For hours, Émilie hadn't said a word, simply crying. She had held so much inside for too long. A few days later, after a difficult night, Émilie sat with Clara over a cup of coffee. "You have to do something, Émilie," Clara said in a soft but firm voice. "I'll support you in everything you do, but you can't keep hiding forever. Their organizations, lawyers, and the police need to know what he did to you." Émilie nodded slowly. The fear of confronting Thomas was still there, but she knew Clara was right. If she wanted to regain control of her life, she had to act, and quickly. The next day, Émilie went to the police station. The mere act of stepping inside the building required immense strength. She explained her story to a compassionate female officer who listened carefully to every detail with gentleness. The officer explained the procedures and assured her that Thomas would no longer be able to approach her once the complaint was filed and protective measures were in place. Émilie left the police station feeling a light weight lift from her shoulders, but she knew the road ahead was still long. A few weeks later, Émilie began therapy. Clara had convinced her that talking to someone outside the situation could help her heal her invisible wounds. The first sessions were difficult: how to explain to someone the extent of what she had been through. How to admit that for so many years she had accepted the blows, the insults, the humiliations, for fear of losing the little she still had. However, session after session, she felt lighter. She began to rediscover who she was before Thomas, before the scars. She found pieces of herself she thought were lost forever: independence, self-confidence, and even a certain joy for life she hadn't felt in years. One day, as she was leaving the therapy room, she met the gaze of a man watching her from the opposite sidewalk. Her heart stopped for a split second, but it wasn't Thomas. It was a stranger, a mere passerby looking at her absently. Yet, that small moment triggered a new surge of panic within her. Thomas still lurked in her thoughts like a menacing shadow. She realized she had to go further in her approach. She couldn't simply be a survivor, she had to become a fighter. The day of the trial arrived. Émilie hadn't slept the night before, anxiety growing with each passing minute. But she was ready. That day, she was going to confront her abuser face to face. In the courtroom, she would finally be heard, and he would be judged. Accompanied by Clara, Émilie entered the courthouse. Her hands trembled slightly, but she was determined never to let fear dictate her life again. Thomas was there, sitting in the room, his gaze lowered. He seemed tiny, insignificant, far from the frightening man he had been in their home. Seeing this gave Émilie new strength. When it was her turn to speak, she recounted everything: every blow, every insult, every night she had cried alone in their bedroom. Her voice was weak at first, but she gained confidence as she spoke. Every word she uttered was a liberation, every truth exposed was a victory. Thomas was sentenced that day to a prison term for domestic violence. For the first time in years, Émilie felt a wave of relief wash over her. She no longer had to flee, no longer had to hide. She was finally free. A year later, Émilie had rebuilt her life. She had found a new apartment, had a stable job, and had made peace with her past. Her therapy continued, but she was no longer the broken woman who had fled into the night. Now, she was a survivor, a woman who had learned to fight for her dignity and freedom. One evening, as she closed the curtains of her new apartment, she smiled, thinking back to that night when everything changed. A night of horror, but also the most unforgettable night of her life. It was the night she took her destiny into her own hands, and she now knew that she would never let herself be broken again. To everyone watching this video, remember, there is always hope, even in the darkest moments. You have the right to live without fear, the right to rebuild your life. Don't face violence alone. There are associations and people ready to support you. Your voice is powerful. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell for more stories like this one. Together, we can raise awareness and bring hope to those in need.